Have you ever felt like something deep inside you is asleep, buried beneath layers of noise, fear, and distraction, as if a part of your soul has been exiled from your daily life, waiting to be remembered? If so, you're not alone. There's a silent crisis echoing through the world today. We've become strangers to ourselves. In the pursuit of comfort, success, and logic, we've abandoned something sacred, the raw, painful, mystical truth of what it means to be human. And no one warned us about this descent more clearly than Fyodor Dostoevsky. Long before modern psychology, Dostoevsky uncovered the shadow that lives beneath the mask. He saw the disconnection, the spiritual emptiness, growing inside a society obsessed with reason and detached from the soul. Through his unforgettable characters and brutal honesty, he revealed what most dare not face, that suffering, contradiction, and inner chaos aren't obstacles, they're the path, that the universe itself is trying to awaken you, through your pain, your dreams, your doubts, to something far deeper than the surface of life. Today we'll enter this forgotten terrain. We'll explore 8 powerful spiritual warnings that Dostoevsky left behind, teachings that are more urgent now than ever. You'll discover how near death can spark rebirth, why knowing yourself hurts before it heals, how dreams, when unchecked, can destroy, and why your shadow holds the key to your transformation. This is not just literature, it's a mystical initiation, a mirror for your inner world. Many people watch our videos without subscribing, and if you're one of them, consider this your invitation. Here on Celestial Truths, we explore the ancient, the symbolic, the hidden. If this speaks to your soul, if you feel that silent calling, subscribe now and stay until the end. What you're about to hear may not just change your perspective, it may reconnect you with your essence, your purpose, and the deeper rhythm of the universe. There are moments in life when time seems to pause, and the universe whispers in silence. For Dostoevsky, that whisper came with the sound of a loaded rifle. He stood before death itself, sentenced to execution, breath frozen in terror, soul split between this world and the next. But fate, or perhaps something more mystical, intervened. At the final second, the order was revoked. That single moment, suspended between the material and the eternal, broke him open to a new reality. It was not merely survival. It was a symbolic death followed by spiritual rebirth. He returned to life not as a man restored, but as one initiated into a deeper layer of existence. The veil had been lifted, and what he saw behind it would shape his entire vision of humanity. To face death is to face the void, the pure unknown, where the ego dissolves and only essence remains. In that space, there are no lies, no roles, no masks. Dostoevsky came back with the understanding that life is not a linear path, but a spiral, always returning to the center, the self. His later writings reveal a man who no longer feared the chaos of the soul, but embraced it. He saw how the human spirit could be broken and still choose to love, how pain could be the threshold to consciousness. What happened on that execution ground was not just a pardon, it was an alchemical transformation. The raw terror he endured carved a sacred emptiness within him, one that made space for universal insight, compassion, and mystical introspection. From that moment on, life was never the same. He walked among people with the quiet awareness of someone who had seen behind the curtain. He understood that most of us are sleepwalking, lost in the surface of things, afraid to look inward. And yet the universe constantly sends us subtle invitations to wake up, through dreams, through synchronicities, through crisis. Dostoevsky's near-death experience is a reminder that even the darkest moment can be a gateway to something greater. In symbolic terms, he descended into the underworld and returned bearing fire, like a modern-day Prometheus of the psyche. He didn't just write stories, he channeled the forgotten language of the soul, one shaped by existential fire and shadow. What can we learn from this? That your worst fear, your deepest fall, might be the very thing that breaks your false identity. Sometimes, when life collapses, it's not punishment, it's initiation. Just as Dostoevsky faced the edge of oblivion, we too can stand before our metaphorical execution walls. Heartbreak, failure, identity loss, silence. These aren't the end. They are the universe's way of pulling you inward, deeper than the noise, beyond reason, to a place where spiritual truth awaits. If you pay close attention, you'll notice that the mystica of existence often reveals itself not in joy, but in the moments when everything else has been stripped away. And so, the journey begins, not with triumph, but with surrender. Surrender to what's broken. Surrender to what you fear. Surrender to the soul's silent calling. Dostoevsky's legacy begins not with his books, but with his death that wasn't. And maybe your awakening begins not with answers, but with a quiet moment of collapse, when all illusions fade and you realize the only way forward is inward. Let us follow this thread into the next mystery, the painful yet freeing act of meeting yourself face to face. Most people spend their lives fleeing from a simple yet terrifying truth. They do not truly know who they are. They wear masks, play roles, and repeat inherited stories, unaware that beneath the surface lies a vast inner universe, full of contradictions, dreams, and forgotten wounds. Dostoevsky understood this better than anyone. To him, the real struggle of the human spirit was not against the world, but against the self. And not the surface self, the persona, but the shadowed, complex being buried underneath, the one that hides beneath politeness, ambition, and social acceptance. To meet that version of yourself, you must step into the fire of inner honesty. And that fire burns. True self-knowledge requires more than introspection. It demands a kind of sacred confrontation. A confrontation with your ego's illusions, with the lies you tell yourself just to survive another day. You'll discover selfish motives dressed as virtue, unhealed wounds masquerading as strength, and dreams that were never yours to begin with. It's a lonely, raw, and often confusing process, yet within that chaos lies a strange kind of clarity, like walking through a fog and suddenly feeling the presence of something ancient, a whisper from your soul. Jung called it the process of individuation, the reconciliation of opposites within the psyche. It is not comfort that leads us there, but tension, crisis, paradox. And so, Dostoevsky's characters aren't just literary figures, they are mirrors. Look closely, and you'll see yourself in Raskolnikov's guilt, in Ivan Karamazov's rebellion, in the underground man's cynicism. They scream the truths we fear to name, but those truths are necessary, because every spiritual awakening, every genuine moment of expansion begins when we stop pretending. The universe won't meet you in your mask, it will meet you where you're naked, trembling, unsure, and finally real. The mystical path is not clean or linear. It spirals into your shadow before it leads you into light. There is a sacred kind of pain in this process, a holy ache, not the pain of punishment but the pain of breaking a shell. Like the chick that must shatter its egg to be born, we too must fracture our false identity to reach the soul. Spirituality is not about escaping who you are, but descending into it, observing your thoughts without judgment, decoding your recurring dreams, journaling your darkest impulses. These are not weaknesses, but doorways. Every confrontation with yourself is a ritual. Every uncomfortable truth, a sacred teacher. The universe speaks through these moments of inner rupture, guiding you to the center of who you truly are. And so we continue. The descent has begun. You've seen the first crack in the mask. Now, will you dare go deeper? Because the next truth Dostoevsky revealed is equally unsettling. Even our most beautiful dreams can become traps. Fantasies, when untethered from reality, may lead not to freedom, but to destruction. Let us descend once more into the dangerous allure of dreams. We're often told to follow our dreams, as if every desire that glows in our imagination is a beacon of truth. But Dostoevsky, with his soul forged in the fire of existential insight, warned us. Not all dreams are meant to be followed. Some are illusions dressed as destiny. Others are projections of the ego, not whispers from the self. To chase a dream without questioning its roots is to risk losing yourself in a maze of fantasy. And fantasies, when unexamined, can become prisons. They seduce us with promises of greatness, yet quietly disconnect us from life's organic flow, from the grounded spirituality of the present moment. Raskolnikov, one of Dostoevsky's most haunting creations, dreamt of being extraordinary, of transcending morality in the name of a higher cause. But what began as a dream of liberation turned into a descent into madness. His mind, intoxicated by ideals, detached from the soul. This is the danger Dostoevsky warns us about. When our dreams are not born from inner alignment, They become weapons of self-deception. The mystical path is not about grandeur, but about truth. And truth often lives in the ordinary, in the quiet pulse of the universe, not in the fevered ambitions of the ego. What looks like a noble goal may be, in fact, an escape from the deeper work of inner transformation. There is a paradox here, one that seekers must face with courage. A dream can either be a bridge to the soul or a mask that hides it. It depends on where it comes from. Is it rooted in love or in fear? Does it arise from your essence or from your need to be seen, validated, remembered? These are spiritual questions, not just psychological ones. The universe speaks to us through longing, but not all longing comes from the soul. Some come from wounds, and to follow a dream born from a wound is to feed the wound itself. This is where discernment becomes essential. To walk the mystic path, you must know the difference between desire and destiny. How then do we recognize dreams that serve the self and not the ego? Through silence, through listening, through watching for synchronicity. Those sacred signals that echo across the subtle planes of existence. Real dreams carry a vibration of peace, even when they demand sacrifice. They don't scream for attention. They whisper. They align with your shadow and your light, your gifts and your limits. They unfold naturally, like the petals of a flower in the rhythm of the universe. They don't consume you. They call you. You don't chase them blindly. You meet them in the stillness where the mystical and the real converge. So let go of the need to prove yourself through your dreams. Let go of the fantasy that greatness must look a certain way. Dostoevsky invites us to wake up, to peel away the illusions, to see that sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't failure, but the wrong dream pursued too far. And once the illusions fade, what remains? The raw truth of life with its messiness, its unpredictability, and its sacred power to transform us. In the next revelation, Dostoevsky shows us how that rawness, specifically our suffering, is not the enemy, but the very forge of the soul's evolution. In a world obsessed with comfort, control, and the avoidance of pain, Dostoevsky's voice rises like a thunderclap through the silence. Suffering is not the enemy. It is the forge. The mystical path he unveils does not promise a painless life. It offers something far more sacred: transformation. To suffer consciously is to enter a holy fire, one that burns away illusions and awakens the soul to its deeper purpose. When we numb pain, we also numb insight. But when we sit with our suffering, observe it, let it speak, it begins to shape us, not into perfection, but into truth. And truth, in all its raw imperfection, is the heartbeat of real spirituality. Dostoevsky's life was steeped in anguish, poverty, exile, addiction, the constant nearness of death. But he never fled from this chaos, he transmuted it. In his characters, pain is never just pain. It is a threshold, a passage. Think of Prince Myshkin's epileptic seizures, moments when the soul seems to touch eternity before collapsing back into the body. Or the psychological torment of Ivan Karamazov, a man whose suffering births philosophical insight, not madness. In every fragment of despair, Dostoevsky plants a seed of transcendence. He shows that suffering, when embraced with awareness, becomes a sacred teacher. It softens the ego, opens the heart, and tunes us to the frequency of the universe. This doesn't mean glorifying pain or seeking it out like a martyr. It means listening. Listening to what your heartbreak is trying to show you. Observing how loneliness leads you back to your forgotten parts. Noticing how grief collapses the boundaries of the ego and makes you suddenly feel the mystical presence of everyone, even strangers, as part of a greater whole. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Dostoevsky lived that truth. He didn't see pain as punishment. He saw it as an initiation, a necessary descent into the underworld of the psyche, where the light is hidden behind layers of shadow, waiting to be found. Suffering, then, is not the opposite of peace. It is the womb of it. When experienced with awareness, pain grounds us. It cracks the shell of false identity and reveals the raw aliveness beneath. We begin to feel more, not just our own wounds, but those of others. Empathy blossoms, humility arises, the illusion of separation dissolves. In this space, spirituality is no longer an escape. It becomes embodiment. It becomes presence. Pain carves out a space where something new can be born, something authentic, something eternal. And in that sacred emptiness, we meet not just our soul, but the living pulse of the mystical cosmos itself. So the next time you suffer, don't rush to fix it. Sit with it, write it, dream it, let the darkness speak. What feels like breaking may actually be the universe remolding you. In Dostoevsky's vision, suffering is not a detour, it's the very path. And once we accept that, the next revelation becomes possible, letting go of the illusion that reason alone can save us, because the soul speaks in contradictions, not formulas, and to truly live, we must dare to enter the realm where logic ends and something much deeper begins. There comes a point in every seeker's path when logic begins to tremble, when the equations no longer hold and the maps no longer lead anywhere familiar. Dostoevsky reached that threshold and crossed it. For him, the human soul could not be measured, predicted, or controlled. It was too vast, too wild, too sacred. In his eyes, those who sought to fit life into neat formulas were blind to its essence. Because life, in its raw spiritual core, is not rational, it is mystical. It speaks in paradox, in emotion, in silence. And sometimes, the truest thing you can do is surrender your need to understand and simply feel. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky confronts the cold arrogance of pure rationalism. His protagonist resists the idea that humans can be reduced to calculations. He rebels against the sterile utopias imagined by society, where people act predictably, logically, obediently. But the human heart doesn't work that way. We love what hurts us. We sabotage what we desire. We choose chaos when comfort is available. Why? Because we are not machines. We are spiritual beings with a foot in two worlds, the visible and the invisible. The universe dances through us, not as algorithm, but as archetype, as dream, as mystery. Carl Jung echoed this truth when he said that the soul doesn't speak the language of logic, it speaks in symbols. And to truly live, we must learn to decode the symbolic language of existence. We must see beyond what appears to what vibrates beneath. When a child laughs, when a storm rises, when you dream of falling into water, these are not random moments. They are messages from the unconscious, from the cosmos, from the self. Reason can help us build bridges and analyze data, but it cannot tell us why our hearts ache under a full moon. That is the realm of the mystical, and Dostoevsky knew it well. So many people suffer not because life is too complex, but because they try to simplify what was never meant to be simple. They seek clarity in places that were meant to remain, sacredly uncertain. They ask for control when the soul asks for surrender, and that creates an inner war, a dissonance that no logic can soothe. What if, instead of asking, "What should I do?" we began asking, "What is life showing me right now?" What if we stopped calculating and started listening, deeply, intuitively, spiritually? That shift alone can change everything. It can reconnect us with the rhythm of the universe, with the mystical river flowing just beneath the noise. Let go, then, of the illusion that you need to understand everything. Some of the most important moments of your life won't make sense. They'll make change. And in that change, your soul will speak, not in words, but in alignment. Dostoevsky invites us to live with questions, not answers, to embrace the unknown not as a threat, but as a portal. And once we do, we begin to see a new kind of wisdom, one that wears the face of a fool, walks with bare feet, and smiles in the rain. Yes, the next mystery is already unfolding. The strange paradox that what looks like foolishness might just be hidden wisdom in disguise. In a world that glorifies intellect, performance, and sophistication, the simple soul is often dismissed. The quiet one, the dreamer, the one who doesn't fit the mold. But Dostoevsky, with his vision tuned to the invisible, saw something different. He recognized a sacred archetype in those labeled as fools. Not the ignorant, but the innocent. Not the naive, but the spiritually unguarded. For him, the fool was not someone who lacked knowledge, but someone who had transcended the need to be right, a vessel of pure presence, a child of the universe, walking in humility, guided not by logic, but by love. Prince Mishkin, the idiot, is perhaps Dostoevsky's most luminous fool. He walks through a cruel, cynical world with a heart wide open, unprotected, uncalculated. People mock him, pity him, try to outsmart him, but he sees what others miss. He listens when no one else does. He forgives instinctively, loves unconditionally, and in that he becomes a mirror. He reveals the absurdity of those who believe themselves wise. In the mystical tradition, such figures are revered because they live without masks. They are aligned with the flow of the cosmos, spontaneous, unfiltered, and painfully honest. Their solace is not weakness. It is a hidden frequency of wisdom that only the heart can hear. This archetype appears across time and culture. In tarot, it's the fool, stepping off a cliff, eyes to the sky, trusting the unknown. In Jungian psychology, it is the part of us that leaps before we calculate, that laughs when life collapses. The fool carries within him the seed of transformation. He is the beginning and the end, and Dostoevsky knew this. His fools often carried more spiritual clarity than the scholars and philosophers around them, because they had let go of the performance. They had returned to the soul, unfiltered, raw, and real. They moved in, harmony with the universe, not the expectations of society. This isn't a call to abandon reason, but to embrace paradox, to allow space for spontaneity, intuition, and authenticity. Sometimes it's the fool who has the courage to say what no one else dares, to love without guarantees, to cry in public, to admit not knowing. These are the real acts of spiritual bravery. In a world desperate for certainty, the one who dances in the unknown becomes a revolutionary. And yes, this revolution begins inside you, when you stop pretending to be perfect, when you start following the strange, quiet guidance of your inner child, the one who still believes in the beauty of being alive. So next time you feel foolish, too emotional, too dreamy, too soft, consider this. Maybe that's not your weakness. Maybe it's your gift. Dostoevsky's fools carry a secret flame, a light that doesn't blind but warms, a wisdom that doesn't dominate but frees. And that light leads us to the next layer of truth, one far more complex, that within every soul both good and evil coexist, and only by acknowledging both can we ever hope to become whole. There is a truth we all sense but rarely dare to face. Within each of us lives both a saint and a monster. Dostoevsky didn't shy away from this. He walked into the heart of the human condition with eyes wide open and brought back revelations most would rather ignore. In his universe, good and evil are not external forces locked in battle. They are twin energies coexisting within the same soul. Each of us contains both light and shadow, and the true danger lies not in having a shadow, but in pretending we don't. To seek only the light is to deny half of who you are, and the denied shadow does not vanish. It festers, it plots, it waits. Characters like Dmitry Karamazov, Raskolnikov, and Stavrogin embody this inner war. Their stories aren't about morality in the traditional sense, but about integration, the painful process of accepting the contradictions that live inside us. Dostoevsky understood, like Jung would later affirm, that individuation isn't about becoming good, it's about becoming whole. We are not here to exile the dark within us, but to understand it, give it voice, and transmute it. Evil, when made conscious, loses its grip, but when repressed, it grows in secret. The mystical task is not purification, but reconciliation. So how do we do this? How do we face the shadow without being consumed by it? The answer is awareness. To observe without judgment your hidden motives, your envy, your aggression, your compulsions, not to justify them, but to see them clearly. This is not an act of weakness, it is spiritual courage. It is the fire of transformation. Dreams can help, meditation can help. Honest conversation with the self, the kind that happens at 3 a.m., alone with your thoughts, can help. The universe doesn't ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be real. And in that raw authenticity, healing becomes possible. Integration becomes sacred. The moral simplicity we're taught, heroes versus villains, light versus dark, is a myth meant for children. The soul is more complex than that. A person can commit great harm and still hold the seed of redemption. A person can appear virtuous and still be driven by hidden corruption. Dostoevsky's world is layered, ambiguous, alive, just like us. And if we truly want to walk a path of spirituality, we must develop compassion not only for others, but for the darkness within ourselves. Only then can we offer that same compassion outward, not as a performance, but as a lived truth. And as we begin to accept our paradoxes, something changes. We soften. We stop needing to divide the world into right and wrong, good and bad. We begin to see the mystical beauty in contradiction itself, and that makes space for a new kind of love, one that doesn't fix or control, but holds, one that redeems. And with that, we reach the final revelation in Dostoevsky's legacy, that freedom is not the absence of flaws, but the presence of responsibility, love, and the courage to transform. Let us now walk toward that final threshold, where the soul finds meaning not in being perfect, but in choosing redemption. At the heart of Dostoevsky's philosophy lies a quiet yet thunderous truth. Freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is taking full responsibility for who you are. In his universe, real liberation doesn't come from escaping consequences, but from embracing them. It's not about being innocent, but about becoming conscious. The path to redemption isn't paved with perfection, but with humility, choice, and love. His characters often fall, deeply, tragically, but what defines them is not their fall, it's whether they rise differently afterward. Redemption in Dostoevsky's world is always available, but only for those who stop blaming the world and begin listening to their soul. To take responsibility is not just a moral act, it is a spiritual initiation. It is the moment when you stop running from your past, your pain, your contradictions, when you look at yourself, not with shame, but with presence. This is where love begins, not the romantic kind, but the mystical, raw love that sees flaws and still stays, that forgives not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, that understands we are all broken, and it's precisely in our brokenness that the light can enter. The universe doesn't require your perfection. It calls for your participation, for your willingness to be honest, to be open, to try again even after you've shattered. There is something redemptive in simply choosing to care, choosing to apologize, choosing to change. These are not grand gestures. They are sacred rituals. In Dostoevsky's vision, salvation is not handed down from the heavens. It is built, moment by moment, in the ordinary, in the messy, in the deeply human. When a person begins to see the beauty in the imperfection of another, when they stop demanding idealized love and instead choose presence, tenderness, truth, that is when the soul awakens. That is when spirituality becomes embodied. And that is where life finds meaning. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't need to erase your past, but you do need to show up, fully, authentically, to stop expecting the world to save you and instead become the author of your own redemption. The mystical paradox is that when you own your flaws, you transcend them. When you love yourself not in spite of your scars, but because of them, you become free. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of presence, of living as you are, not as you pretend to be. And when you live this way, you become a mirror. You give others permission to do the same. That is how the universe heals itself, through us. So let this be the final threshold of our descent and our return. Responsibility is not a burden, but a doorway. Love is not a fantasy, but a choice. Redemption is not distant. It's already here, in this breath, in this moment, waiting to be claimed. Dostoevsky's message lingers like an ancient echo. To be truly alive is to embrace the totality of your being, your light, your shadow, your wounds, your love, and to walk forward with open eyes and an open heart. And now, as we prepare to complete this mystical journey, let us return to the beginning and reveal the spark that ignited all, the fragile miracle of surviving and choosing to live. Now that you've glimpsed the inner universe Dostoevsky dared to unveil, what will you do with this awareness? Will you turn away, or will you listen to the whisper calling you deeper into yourself? Tell me in the comments, which of these truths resonated the most with your soul? Have you ever faced one of these hidden initiations in your own life, a collapse that turned into rebirth? Your story might be the key that awakens someone else. If this journey stirred something inside you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Celestial Truths, and turn on the notifications. That's how you stay connected to this path of inner awakening and ensure you don't miss the next revelations waiting to unfold. And speaking of next steps, The video that's appearing on your screen right now continues this journey. Click on it to dive even deeper into the mysteries of the soul. With reverence and clarity, celestial truths.